Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am so honored to be joined by Jeff Reynolds. Jeff, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, first and foremost, Xander, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. In my day life, I'm the president and CEO of a large not-for-profit organization here on Long Island called Family and Children's Association. We provide a variety of services to vulnerable folks in our community. And so those services include everything from a nursery school to addiction treatment and recovery services, mental health programs, shelters for runaway homeless and trafficked kids, and some senior services. And so in all, we serve about 35,000 people per year. I think the other reason you had me on is I last year published my first book called Every Mile Matters. Turning triathlon training into cancer triumph. And not to give away the punchline, but I'm also a 2-time cancer survivor and an endurance athlete. And so, and I love talking about the ways in which we can take steps forward and improve and enhance our lives.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on 2-time cancer survivor. That is really impressive. When I saw your profile, I'm like, ooh, he's a triathlete. I am not a triathlete, although I have run marathons and ultra marathons in years past. I'm not currently doing it, but always good to talk to another endurance athlete. There's so much that we learn about ourselves when we put ourselves in that situation to challenge ourselves. So how did you get into doing triathlons?
So it's a funny story. I was at a conference. I was in my mid-40s at this point. At that point, I'm 59 now. In going through what anybody would characterize as a midlife crisis. I'm at a professional conference. It's 2 a.m. We're doing what sometimes people do at professional conferences at 2 a.m. in a bar. And a bunch of people are like, "Hey, do you want to run a 5K in the morning?" And I'm like, "In like 4 hours? Yeah, okay. What could go wrong with that?" And so, 4 hours later, I'm there at the start line wearing like cargo shorts and, the t-shirt I would wear under my suit that day, sneakers that are not equipped for running in any imagination. And so take off like a bat out of hell when the gun goes off. 90 seconds later, I am sweating and panting and cursing and walking. I make it through the race, 36 minutes and, look at myself and say, wow, I'm really out of shape. I need to do something about this. And then I did what any sane individual would do. I went back to my hotel room and started maniacally registering for every 5K near my home that I could find. And so, 5Ks became 10Ks, became half marathons, became marathons. And so I've done 15 of those. And then I went back to that conference 2 years later, actually won the 5K. And, decided, all right, so like I've done this, I'm mediocre at one sport, maybe I could suck at 3 sports. And so I took up swimming, biking, and running.
Yeah.
Went and got swim lessons, bought a bike that costs, twice what my first car cost.
Exactly.
And then, built up there too. Started with sprint triathlons, moved to Olympic distance, then half irons. And then in the beginning of 2021 said, you know what, I really want to test myself. I want to come up with a big audacious goal that scares the hell out of me a little bit. And so it was Ironman Florida. And so I trained over the course of 2021 for that. The first weekend in November 2021, I did Ironman Florida. And although some folks would associate Ironman with a superhero, it is, when it comes to endurance sports, it's a 2-mile and change swim. It's 112 miles on the bike and then a full 26.2-mile marathon. And you have to do that all within 17 hours. Otherwise, none of it counts and you're disqualified.
Yes.
You don't get the free banana and the free medal that you can't even wear to work the next day. But I did it in 15 hours and 9 minutes and, certainly a highlight and, a great example where at the beginning of the year I said, I'm going to do this, put my mind to it and was able to complete it. And, quite frankly, was on top of the world and felt like, wow, I'm in the best shape of my life. I didn't set any world records doing this, but I got it done. And it
Yeah,
was
yeah. Look, I mean,
a
Jeff,
nice
you
challenge.
finished it. I certainly did not win any. I wasn't winning any of the halves or fulls, but
Right.
I completed all of them. So they give you a medal whether you come in first
Yeah.
or you come in last. And I mean, that's I think one of the things that's really great about endurance sports is you do get not only the personal reward, but you have some bling to say, yes, I did this. And look, hats off to you for doing a full iron, because that's insane. I mean, lots of people knew when I was running, and then I started to do road biking, like, oh, are you gonna do triathlon? I'm like, no, no. I love road biking, but I honestly can't imagine going, let me ride my bike for 112 miles and now let me go run a full marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's you are depleted to say the least, but you said at the opening, and I agree, so fully with this, is that you learn a lot about yourself in endurance sports, and there are some very, very dark moments. And one of the kind of moments I use as a metaphor all the time is mile 18 of the marathon.
Mhm.
You and I know that thing called the wall, and it's this fight between your brain and your legs saying, "Stop, stop, stop. Why are you doing this? This is crazy." You're far enough into it to be tired, but not close enough to the end where you're like, "Oh, this is just a little bit more and I'll be done." And so I always feel like, part of why I love triathlon was it gets you comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah,
You
and
acknowledge it and you move on.
yeah, I mean, I know through all of my marathon training and road bike, to training for centuries, there's a lot of time. You have a lot of time to think. You have a lot of time to sometimes question your sanity. I know.
Second guess your life choices.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, Jeff, that there was more than one race where it seemed like a great idea when I signed up, but did not feel so much the good idea when I was actually doing it. Like
But then we finish and we go and do it again.
we do. We do. One of the things I talk to people about, and it was a question I had for you, which is when you finish, like when you finish, let's say your first half marathon, you're ecstatic that you've done it.
Yeah.
How long was it before you asked this question? Now what?
Literally 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way my mind works. And one of the things my coach said to me, I have a tri coach, and one of the things she said to me is I was getting ready. It was a couple days before Ironman Florida. And she said, make sure you savor the finish line.
Oh yeah.
And so generally we get to the finish line and we race across, and then, we get the aluminum blanket and that kind of thing. And in Ironman, you're not going fast, so you don't have a choice but to savor it. You're in every minute of it. But I really did think about it as I approached the finish line, and it's dark out. It's 10 o'clock at night at that point, and you could hear it from afar. It was like, all right, that's the finish line. I could hear the music, I could hear the announcer, and I was very intentional and conscientious about saying, "You're on the black and red carpet now. Enjoy every moment of it, because these moments don't necessarily happen every day."
Yeah, and I may not either be
Right.
able or want to be back here.
Right. This could
And
be one and done. Right.
and I always imagine, hearing those magic words, Jeff Reynolds, you are an Iron Man, is
Yeah,
just
so
make you go.
really,
Did you cry?
absolutely, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do now in races, and people will understand once I tell the story. But here's a full circle moment. So Mike Riley is the guy who recently retired from Ironman. He's the announcer. Like when Mike Riley doesn't announce your race, it's not the same. And so when I heard Mike was announcing Ironman Florida, it made a difference to me.
Definitely.
And so Mike did call me across the finish line. I have a video of it that a friend did for me. And then when I did the audiobook version of my book, I reached out to Mike and said, "So here's my story. Here's my deal. Would you do the audiobook?" And so he actually did the narration for my audiobook.
Oh, wow, that's
Um,
awesome.
we spent 3 days together in a studio in San Diego. in a nondescript office park where all these famous folks go to record their audiobooks and music. And it was really a full circle moment in which, I was able to say to Mike, you're the guy who called me across the finish line, and now you're reading the audiobook about, my journey. And so
Definitely.
really was a full circle moment. Finish lines now, they hit differently. And so the story, to fill in the blanks for some of your listeners, because I've hinted at the cancer dynamic a couple times. So, I finished Ironman Florida in November of 2021 in the best shape of my life, feeling good about everything, go for routine physical. And life changed for me with a text message. It's a Friday on April 1st, 2022, April Fool's Day, appropriately enough.
Yeah.
Drop down the highway, I get a text message. It's from my healthcare provider. I get to a light, I jump into my healthcare portal because they can't text you directly. And I scroll through pages of medical jargon that I don't really understand. And then I get to the punchline. And the punchline is clinically significant prostate cancer likely.
Wow.
And I found out I had cancer via a text message on a Friday on the way to the dentist. And so, my journey didn't start that day. It started with the routine physical and then some tests. And then I dug a little bit deeper, and this is what they came up with. And so I got spun into this world of, how in God's name could I have cancer? I just did Ironman Florida.
Yeah.
And then honestly, one of the things that like a red light going off, I'm like, yeah, I just did Ironman Florida. So I did Ironman Florida with cancer. I can do this. Like, I do hard things. I did both of those things at the same time. I can deal with cancer. And so the test that is the Ironman race really became a testament to what was possible. And so prostate cancer technology, detection, treatment has changed dramatically in recent years. And so I had surgery in July of 2022, fought with my doctor about when I could run again. Because I couldn't run, I spent hours walking around the nurse's station after my surgery. I think I racked up more than a mile just kind of pacing around the nurse's station. So they probably should have, at that point, ordered a psych eval, but they didn't. And I wanted to run the New York City Marathon that year. I didn't set the world on fire. I peed some blood. I lost a toenail, but I got it done. That was an intense finish line because I'm like, all right, so I'm back. Like, I did this. I'm back. I've got that finish line feeling again. And, I can't wait for 2023 with all this behind me. And so by then I'd really become an evangelist for routine screenings. I did a commercial for the Prostate Cancer Foundation of America that's literally shown millions of times. There's not, a week that goes by where I don't get a text message from somebody I know saying, I saw you on TV.
Yeah.
But I wanted to jump in. I wanted to kind of say to other men, particularly younger men who don't see themselves as being at risk, and I had zero symptoms whatsoever, to say, look, get checked. It makes a big difference. It did for
Absolutely.
me. Right.
Yeah.
And so, men are notoriously lousy at taking care of their own health. And so, I became an evangelist for this. And so I took some of my own advice. In August of that year, I went and got a colonoscopy, and I woke up from the colonoscopy and the doctor says, hey, look, you got a couple polyps. I took them out. I'm not worried about those, but I also found a significant mass that I could not remove.
Right.
I said, well, so how significant? He said, well, it's very significant. You need to get an oncology referral on the way out.
Right.
And so I did that. If I wasn't sure that this was a big deal, he called at 7 o'clock that night. I'm on my Peloton trying to, cycle away from the horror that I've just experienced. And he's like, I'm just calling to check on you. And I'm like, you don't call to check on people after colonoscopies unless things are really bad. And
Yeah, exactly.
he's like, yeah, pretty much. Did you get that referral? And so, eventually I'd be diagnosed with stage 3B colorectal cancer. I, there too, had a great medical team. And so I went through 27 rounds of radiation, 35 rounds of chemo. I'm still part of a clinical trial where they monitor me pretty aggressively. But I'm now 22 months out with no evidence of disease. And so it looks like a pretty complete response. And you hear the guarded language there, right? Doctors no longer say,
I get it.
you're cancer free or you're in remission. It's much more guarded language. We don't see any evidence of disease at this time, kind of thing. But for all intents and purposes, it was the response they were looking for. Was the response I was looking for. And we'll talk about the ins and outs of this. But just to put, the kind of final point on this, I did Ironman 70.3, New York in September. I ran up all 1,500 stairs of the Empire State Building in October as part of a fundraiser for the cancer team at NYU Langone. So I'm back out there and doing it.
That is awesome, Jeff. And honestly, what an epic story, truly. And also, you're so right. Yes, I too have had. I've had I call them the sneak and peek. The check for colorectal cancer and colonoscopy and stuff. And no, it's not pleasant. But so often, when you do these things routinely, stuff gets caught. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm about the same age as you. I certainly know lots of stories of, well, if he'd had a screening, they would have been able to catch it and it would have killed him. But by the time they found it, it was stage 4 and there really wasn't a lot that they could do. Pay attention. Like our bodies are fantastic instruments. If you pay attention and go, hey, this doesn't feel right. I think one thing as endurance athletes and just anyone who exercises, it does honestly, I think, help you in the rest of your life and especially with your health because you understand the difference between hurt and sore. Because when you're training, if you're running, riding a bike, swimming, whatever, repeatedly, you learn like the times, hey, I can push through this. And the times of, yeah, no, this isn't a push through. This is, I am hurt, like
Yeah.
in running a marathon, your feet will hurt. The bottom of your feet will hurt.
Right.
Luckily, knock on wood, I never experienced plantar fasciitis, but there are times where you learn that because you're out there all the time. You're spending
Right.
hours and stuff. And I do think you're right. I mean, yeah, these tests aren't always the most pleasant, but wouldn't you rather find out, you know?
Yeah, look, the worst thing somebody could say to me, and I've had guys do this about prostate exams, is, it's inconvenient, it's yucky, I don't like it. And I'm like, you know what? Spend a week with me and let me, even the follow-up testing I have to do now. You think a colonoscopy is unpleasant, you ain't seen nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't have to do it every 3 months. And so for my male friends that say, I don't want to have a prostate exam, I describe to them in excruciating detail what a prostate biopsy is like. They go get their checkups.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing about endurance athletes. I have 2 friends, one diagnosed way before me of colorectal cancer, and one diagnosed just a little bit before me, and neither one survived. But in both cases, like I compared notes with them and said, I had no symptoms. Did you? And in both cases, they said, you know what? I had some bleeding. I didn't feel right, but I assumed it's because I beat the hell out of my body, that you're going to bleed occasionally, that you're going to feel tired, that you're going to feel run down. And so I think the other message for endurance athletes is, get things checked and don't necessarily automatically chalk them up to training or to our lifestyle or whatever else. And so, and both of those gentlemen, I will tell you, could easily distinguish between being hurt and being sore. And both were really smart about not racing when there was something serious going on. But both said, yeah, I saw, I had some GI distress, I had some bleeding, I was tired. Those are symptoms of a potential problem, but they're so easily confused with any number of things. You don't think, well, maybe it's cancer, right?
Well, yeah, but I guess, sometimes, a level of, I don't want to say paranoia, but just like, I know when I go in to have, my annual physical and stuff, I'm bringing up so many things that are probably irrelevant.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Jeff, and my audience. The thing that may seem unrelated, one thing doesn't seem related to the other. If you just mention it to your doctor, they're the experts. They're the ones who go, well, oh, wait, hold on. You had you're tired and you have bruising that isn't healing as
Right.
quickly as it should.
Right.
Just going, hey, I've got a bruise that isn't, seems to take a long time to heal. Well, maybe they blow it off, but if you add, and I seem to have a lot of fatigue, all of a sudden they go, oh,
Right.
Well,
We
let
didn't
us check
continue.
for
Right.
leukemia or something
Right.
like that. You know what I mean? It's like, even if you think it's irrelevant, tell your doctors everything
Yeah.
that's going on because you never know. And how many people are happy when they say something? They're not happy that, but I'd say the best of bad news. You find out, you mention something and you find out that it's stage one, not stage three, stage four, whatever. So,
Well, look,
uh,
my prostate cancer was stage 2, but I said to my doctor, "Look, I really want to run the New York City Marathon. Let's do the surgery after the marathon." He's like, "Absolutely not." He's like, "The likelihood of spread is so significant. There's no way we should wait." And when I think about the second go around, do you stage cancer across a continuum? Stage 3B for me was precariously close to stage 4.
yeah,
And so, had I gone another 6 months, a year without a test, it could have been a completely different ballgame. And
yeah.
so, and the survival rates are vastly different between the stages.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the importance of early detection can't be overstated. And I agree with you 100%. When you go to your doctor, you're paying for a service. It's your one shot to get things checked out. Put it on the table. It might be nothing, but better safe than sorry. And then you could walk out of there feeling like I laid everything out to the best of my ability, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
Right?
mean,
You
don't
never want to have regrets. I had no regrets. I didn't put off my test, and so I didn't walk out of there saying, "Oh, geez, if I had done things differently, maybe the outcome." I walked out of there saying, "Well, thank God they caught it early. I don't put off tests, and man, imagine if I had."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I sadly I know from, my life and, hearing my parents and stuff. Oh, he didn't go have, the colonoscopy. He,
Right.
whatever. And had he done it at 50, they would have caught it. Now at 60, there's not much that can be done, and that's horrible. All right, enough talking about like our mortality and
Yeah.
stuff like that. One of the things I do, and we just talked about, I didn't get to sort of preface and go, "Hey, here's the epic unexpected," but certainly these two, very unexpected, not things that you would expect. What are one or two things from that experience that you take away that have meaning for you and that you share with people?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So there are people out there who will talk about something like this happening to them being a blessing and a gift, and I'm
Hmm.
not in that camp.
Okay.
I don't believe that cancer is a blessing. I don't see it
Mm.
as a gift, but I do think it does help create some moments and mindsets in you. And for me, that was the case that I didn't necessarily have before. And so there's two things. One is an incredible sense of gratitude. And
Mhm.
so, I remember falling into a pattern with my training. My coach would give me, a training to do. I have an app that I log into and I'd say, I have to run 5 miles today. And these days it's not I have to, it's I get to run 5 miles.
Yeah.
I'll never forget sitting in the infusion room, all hooked up to my port and everything else, and it overlooked a sidewalk, and I saw people running by all day, and I'm like, "Man, what I wouldn't give to be out there doing this." And I did exercise through chemo, it helped immensely, but I didn't exercise to the same extent, and I wasn't running 5 miles.
Yeah.
So, that sense of gratitude, you just learn a new profound respect for the people around you, your ability to wake up every day, the gift of time. And so my sense of gratitude for the things around me, including my friends and family who supported me through both diagnoses, that really grew. The second thing that I got from this, there's an entire chapter on the book on spirituality. And I wrestled with it. I can write fast, but it took me several weeks to write that chapter, and it's not very long. It's 13 pages. Um, but the amount of work that I had to do that I hadn't done before, and I didn't realize I hadn't done it before around my own spirituality, was so intense, and it was so challenging to write about as I kind of wrestled with these questions, right? It went from, past tense to it went from future tense to past tense in terms of what do I want my legacy to be? It really became, so what has my legacy been if this is it?
Mhm.
questions about what I believe happens to me when I die. Do I believe in God? And if so, how does that play out in my everyday life? And so, I almost left the chapter out because I'm like, it's holding up the whole book. Nobody would know that it was supposed to be in there. I could just leave this out. And then I'm like, well, that's like jumping on a subway at mile 18 of the marathon and then
Yeah.
jumping at the finish line and saying, look, I'm done. Well, no, you
The
cheat.
You Rosie Ruiz it,
Right,
or like,
right,
hold on,
right.
let me take the tea and
Right, right. So I decided to kind of plow through and do it and try to resolve some of those questions. So my sense of spirituality changed pretty dramatically. And it's not one of those, hey, I thought I might die, I finally found God type of stories, because that's not kind of the way I roll. But it was, I've got to put into perspective what I actually believe and how I feel about things and really do an examination of, how I'm living my life. And so those were two of the things. There were some other things that certainly emerged for me. I chose a sport that by and large is viewed as a solo sport. It's not a team sport, right? It's not like football. It's not
no,
like
no.
baseball.
You're the
You're
only
kind of
one who can do that, that 140, what, 142, 100 and
yeah, yeah, 100, yeah. So it's really you and your own thoughts for 140.6 miles, but your family makes sacrifices for you to train. My family made a lot of
of
sacrifices. I would leave
course.
on Saturday morning and say, "I'll see you in 10 hours because I'm going to ride my bike for 100 miles and then I'm gonna run." It's the volunteers and the race directors, the people who put the race on and make sure that you stay safe. And so, I always said Ironman, it doesn't feel like a team sport, but you can't do it alone. And the same thing for me applied to cancer.
Mhm.
I needed to rely on the healthcare system. I needed to rely on friends and family. I had a job that was very understanding, although I didn't miss 5 minutes of work. I had a job that was willing to roll with whatever. And so, I learned that sense of tribe and camaraderie in all of this that I
Definitely.
might not have learned otherwise.
Definitely. Now, we have just a few minutes left. I'd love to ask my guests this question, which is, in my book, I talk about two really powerful words are not yet, because for me, there's so much optimism. So, for example, when you were training for Ironman Florida, oh, Jeff, have you run it? Not yet. Doesn't mean you're not going to, doesn't mean you're not, it's just you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
So, for you, what's one or two of your not yets, things that you hope to accomplish, want to accomplish, but just haven't gotten to yet?
Yeah, look, so I'm slowly getting into sharing my story with more people to encourage screening, to
Hmm.
talk about men's mental health, to talk about that notion of gratitude and how we all have this invisible countdown clock above our heads, even if we don't see it, and making the most of your life and really connecting with others in a way that's very, very rich. I will go back and do another Ironman, probably not in 26, but probably in 27. And I don't know what comes next. One of the things I learned is that um, usually our cumulative experiences, and in my case, Ironman, are preparing you for a race that you never signed up for and you never saw coming.
Exactly.
So the more you can build yourself up emotionally, socially, physically, it's like money in the bank for whatever you want to do. There's no stopping you. In the book, I write about a um, a tattoo I have, and it's the Iron Man, the M dot with
Yeah.
blue ribbon wrapped around it for my cancer survival, and around it is scrolled "Every mile matters" and "Miles to go before I sleep."
Yep.
Right. And so we all have miles to go before we sleep. The question is, what are we going to do with them? Are we going to make the most of them, or are we just going to kind of tick off our weekdays until we can get to the weekends and then have the Sunday scaries and do it all over again? One day, look, we've only on average all got 79 years on this earth. And so are you making the most of it? Are you making big, bold steps? Are you doing stuff that scares you just a little bit? Do more of those things while you have the chance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. What an epic conversation. I appreciate you, sharing it. I appreciate you sharing that the encouragement for men to go out and get screened,
Yeah.
so important. So important. Well, I want to thank you so much for
Thank
coming. Where can people find your book? If they want to get a
Sure.
hold of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, yeah. So the book is available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, all the places that you would generally buy books. The audiobook by Mike Riley is available on on Apple, on Audible, all those regular places. The book has a website, everymilematters.com, or look me up on social, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And look, if you're struggling with something, including a recent cancer diagnosis, I'm always here to listen and always here to help.
I really appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks,
I want to
sir.
remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.